Builds, loadouts, whatever you want to call it, in Destiny 2 are extremely important. I'd argue that without a well thought out and synergistic build, you are missing out on a colossal portion of the game. And you're really handicapping yourself by making a lot of content much more difficult than it needs to be. There's so much thrown at you in this game, it can be really confusing to figure it all out, but my goal for this video is to make sure that you feel more confident in knowing how to approach build crafting. So this is not going to show you the best builds on every class, it's not that kind of a video. I definitely do think there is a place for those videos, they're very helpful, I mean, I make those myself. But hopefully this will help rewire your brain to just understand build crafting at its base level a bit better for yourself. So I'm going to design a build here to show you my thought process, and I'll be starting from the most broad things first, then moving to more granular and minute details in a 10-step process. And don't worry if you're not an Arc Titan like this build shows, a lot of what I go over will still apply to you, it's still going to be helpful. The main thing I want you to take away from this is the steps that you need to take to plan out your builds. And some of this stuff might sound really obvious to some of you, but this video should also be digestible for newer players like day one people, so we are going to get basic here for a little bit. First step, you got to pick your class. You've got Titan, Hunter, or Warlock. Each of these will provide you with a unique playstyle and can work with each of the 5 subclasses in their own ways. Which leads me to step 2. Pick which subclass you want to use. Arc, Solar, Void, Stasis, or Strand. In this example, I'm going to go with an Arc Titan because everyone has access to it, but you can apply, again, what I'm showing you to any class or subclass that you want. It's all the same. You might think step 3 would be to start customizing our subclass, but I would suggest finding the exotic armor that you want to use in your build first. Exotic armor really amplifies your build's potential and often will boost specific parts of subclasses. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. So just to get some examples out, an example of an exotic that does not buff anything specific is something like Heart of Inmost Light on Titan, which just refills any abilities as you use them, no matter what subclass you're on. An example of an exotic that does buff something specific in a subclass is the Point Contact Cannon Brace Gauntlets, which happens to be the exotic armor that we will be picking for today's build. It's going to buff our Thunderclap melee ability pretty significantly, which is a specific melee ability only available on Arc Titan. So if we have Point Contact Cannon Brace equipped without Thunderclap as our melee, then it's just a useless exotic, it's a useless piece of armor for us. So big takeaway is to really look at each exotic armor piece you own to see exactly how you should use it. And if you're a new light, maybe you just started playing today, maybe you don't have a lot of exotics to choose from, that's okay too. You do get exotic armor pretty quickly and regularly as you play the game by either completing quests, running Legend or Master Lost sectors, Nightfalls, Zur, Vex incursions, the list goes on. There's a lot of places to get exotics from. And you can actually view the entire library of exotics from right here in the Collections tab. This is a great way to figure out which one you want to use for your build, as all of the descriptions are available to you when you inspect them. So you might need to do a little bit of homework, a little bit of research to figure out which exotic is going to be best for you. All right, we've got our Point Contact Cannon Brace wielding Arc Titan. 3 steps down so far. Time for step 4, which is equipping firstly whatever it is that your chosen exotic armor buffs and or building out your subclass. So we're going to combo those into one step. For us, again, the Point Contact Cannon Brace buffs our Thunderclap melee ability, so we'll go ahead and slot that in first. Next, I'm going to move on to the Aspects, which are the main subclass abilities that we get to pick from. And no matter what class or subclass you're running, you will always be able to equip 2 aspects at a time at maximum. For these, you'll want to really read and pay attention to the descriptions here so you know exactly what they do. And I would suggest going to a Lost Sector, maybe Altars of Sorrow on the Moon to test these out to get a feel for them. Aspects are pretty much the core abilities of our subclasses, so understanding how to use them is obviously very important. In our Arc Titan example here, I'm going to pick Knockout and Touch of Thunder as my 2 aspects. Knockout is going to buff melees to have increased range and damage, and will also heal us when we kill enemies. So now we have both Point Contact Cannon Brace and the Knockout aspect that are buffing our Thunderclap melee. Awesome. Touch of Thunder, the second aspect, will buff 4 out of the 7 available grenade options on Arc, so we obviously want to make sure we equip one of those grenades listed in the description. I'm going to use the Pulse Grenade since it's really strong already, and now Touch of Thunder is going to make them even stronger. It's going to make it to where Pulse Grenades create these ionic traces and deal more damage over time. And if you didn't know, ionic traces are those arc bolts that you see on the ground that will travel toward you, and these will replenish a little bit of ability energy for each ability you have, so they are great. So at this point, we're really making some progress. The build is starting to come together. So next, you can go ahead and pick your super ability. Since neither of our aspects or exotic armor buffs our super ability, we can just pick whatever we want here. I'm going to go with Thunder Crash since it's generally what I like to use over Fists of Havoc, but if for some reason you're copying this build, maybe you do want to use Fists of Havoc, go for it. Same idea as well for the jump and the class ability. Nothing we have equipped is buffing either of these, so we can just choose whatever we want. I am going to use the Thruster ability for Arc Titan though for the added movement potential. I do like the Thruster. So that was kind of a big step 4. I get it, but we made it. For step 5, we're going to get our fragments in order. These fragments on the bottom row are smaller adjustments and passive abilities to our subclasses, but they're still very important. There are a lot of fragment options for every subclass, but the nice thing is that unlike aspects, these fragments are the same for Titan, Hunter, and Warlock, so all classes get the same fragments. For this build, I'm going to pick Spark of Shock, Magnitude, Resistance, and Beacons. Shock is going to buff our grenades by giving them the Jolt effect, and Magnitude is going to make lingering grenades last even longer. Which, remember, our Pulse Grenade is already getting buffed by Touch of Thunder, the aspect, so both of these fragments we're adding are going to supercharge them even further. Spark of Resistance makes us a bit more tanky when surrounded by enemies, which makes sense since a huge part of this build is designed around our Thunderclap melee, so we're going to be up close and personal a lot. Spark of Beacons will create a blinding explosion from special ammo arc weapons while we are amplified, which amplified is an arc specific buff that can trigger different effects that at its base will make us move faster and have better weapon handling. There's a few ways to become amplified, but the easiest way is to just get multi-kills with arc damage. So now our subclass is totally done. Let's move on to step 6. Step 6 is getting our weapons in order. Depending on what exotic armor you've chosen, you might be limited on your options since some exotics buff certain weapon types or weapon damage types. So if that's you, make sure you pick your weapons accordingly. And to be honest, you probably took care of this in step 4 anyway, but hey, this is just a reminder. You might also be limited to what weapons you can choose if you're dealing with champions on higher difficulty content. And obviously for raids and dungeons, you will typically have a specific damage strategy that might not correlate with the exact weapons that you choose here. But anyway, in this example, we are just going over a general utility build that can work in most content, including higher difficulty stuff too. So this is actually a pretty strong build. So back to our Arc Titan example here, we've got Spark of Beacons equipped, so we're going to want to use a special ammo arc weapon to be able to trigger those blinding explosions while we're amplified. And I'm going to be going with one of my favorite weapons, Forbearance. This is an arc waveframe grenade launcher found in the Vow of the Disciple raid that is an ad clearing monster and will easily trigger those arc blinds, which can actually stun unstoppable champions as well. And don't worry, if you don't have Forbearance, that's totally fine. You can use whatever other arc special weapon you want here. It's still going to work very well for you. And if you're on a different class or subclass, I would suggest in general to always go with weapons that match the damage type of your currently equipped subclass. There's a good amount of benefits to doing so since there is a lot of synergy with how they work with your subclass. So good idea to do so. But anyway, for my heavy weapon, I'm going to be going with an Arc LMG, and there is none better than Thunderlord. Nice thing about Thunderlord is that it deals with overload champions intrinsically. And finally, for my kinetic slot, the safe bet here is to roll with an auto rifle. In season 22, auto rifles can deal with barrier champions, so that is 3 champion types covered with this build. We are good to go. And moving on to step 7, which is kind of another big step here, but we're going to get our armor in order. I like using D2 Armor Picker. I'll include a link in the description down below since it shows you the best combinations of armor that you have on your account, so you don't have to do the math in your head. Just make sure it knows which exotic armor that you've picked, as well as any other fragments that might change some of your stats. Safe bet here, for pretty much any build, you want to go with high resilience and high discipline, so I'm going to do that. And since this build is heavily focused on our Thunderclap melee, I'm going to get a good amount of strength as well to help that Thunderclap come back quicker. If you're struggling to get high stat armor, by the way, you want to focus those seasonal engrams at the helm into armor of your choice. It's a great way to get that spiky stat armor to make getting good stats very easy. And you'll also want to make sure you have a ghost mod equipped to guarantee at least 10 points in any stat of your choice. All right, so armor looks good now. We've got it set up. Let's equip it in game and slot in some mods. This is where we really are going to fine tune stuff. And of course, course, every mod setup will be different for the build that you're using, but I'll explain why I'm equipping what I'm equipping as I go. The first step is to equip the mods to get the stats that D2 Armor Picker gave you, so slot those in real quick. And once that's done, let's move over to the other mod slots. For our helmet, since this build is very melee and grenade focused, I'm going to use 1 Ashes to Assets and 1 Hands On for some extra super energy for getting kills with those abilities. If you want to, you can double up on either one of these to increase the effect, but I like using one of each. And for that final 1 point on the helmet, at least for me, I have 1 point left, I'm going to use Harmonic Siphon to generate an Orb of Power on arc weapon multi-kills. Should be very easy with the arc weapons that I have. Kind of the same theming for gloves here. I've got a firepower mod that will generate orbs from grenade kills, so that's 2 sources that are generating orbs for us now. Nice. I'm also using 1 momentum transfer and 1 impact induction, so our melee and grenade abilities can refill each other as they damage enemies. The chest slot is very easy. I always go with 2 resist mods of whatever resist I currently need, and then a charged up if I can fit it for some extra armor charge capacity. And for the boots, this one you'll probably have to change pretty often, since surges you kind of have to switch those around. So for any like raid, dungeon, boss encounter, I will triple up on surge mods that match the weapon I'm using, but for this example we're going to keep it general, just whatever works for what we have equipped so far. So I'm going to use 1 better already to heal me up when picking up those orbs that we're generating. We're going to be generating a lot, remember. Then I'll go with 2 arc surge mods to get a 17% arc weapon damage buff while armor charged. And if you want a little refresher on surge mods, you can have up to 3 equipped. 1 is going to get you a 10% buff, 2 gets you 17%, and 3 gets you 22%. So there are some diminishing returns there. And finally, for the class item, I'm going to go with double bomber to refill some grenade energy when using my class ability, and 1 time dilation to get 5 additional seconds for each armor charge we have. So step 7 done. That was a big one again, but we are getting close to the end here. Step 8 is pretty quick, and technically you can do this part whenever you like. You don't have to do it at step 8, but to me this is more of the fine-tuning stuff, so I'm just going to save it for the end here. For this, we're going to be getting the right seasonal artifact perks unlocked. I don't want to go too much into detail here because seasonal artifacts are only here for a limited time. They're only available for the season they're in, but in season 22 for this specific build, the crucial perks that I would use if you're copying along are anti-barrier auto, elemental orbs arc, refreshing pickups, rapid fire ranger, and frenzied stacks. But again, this will be completely different in future seasons and episodes, so I wouldn't read too much into this part if I were you. Step 9 is arguably the most crucial step, and that's fashion setup. My dad always told me that you gotta look good to play good, and this holds true in Destiny. Go get your Guardian looking awesome down in that armor customization area, and we can now finally hit save on the loadout tab. But we do have one more step, step 10. This is where you're going to go out and test your build. The best place to test out a full build is Savathûn Spire from Season of the Witch. In my opinion, there is no better place to test a build. There is really good ad density here, so it's perfect for getting all of your abilities, aspects, fragments, and mods to proc. You'll also learn the timing for how quickly your abilities regenerate, how things synergize, and more importantly, how much stronger you'll be. Well, those are 10 steps that I have naturally started to take when creating each build that I do. I really hope this was helpful, and if it was, let me know down in the comments. And if you still have questions on something, if I wasn't clear on anything, please join the Discord, link in the description, where we can help you with any build questions that you might have. Alright, well that is it for this one. I will see you all in the Discord or in the next video.